Hey there, greetings to my people from here at the Great Start Studio, where all of my drumming dreams are coming true. It's true. So this is where I'm shooting a video of the entire instructional series here in the studio, the 13 volumes of the London's Great Start Drum Set series. It's printed and the Kindle versions are available on Amazon as well as on my website, which is London's Great Start Drum Set. You can go there and check it all out. All my new videos from the studio will be available on that website for online lessons. Today I'm going to be talking about revealing some of my original drum heroes, what I call the Artistic Influence series. Drummers that I can actually see some of their playing in mine, that they've influenced me to that level. Drummers who truly changed my playing for the better, all the way through. There's some influence there in my actual hands and feet when I play. If in the studio, if I made posters of all the tribute, as a tribute to all the people, it'd just be every inch of every wall would be covered. It's just that these are the ones that have really, really influenced me in some foundational sort of way. So I made these posters as a tribute and a reminder of these great players. They're in my office. I'll be showing you. There's just too many to cover them all, but a handful that have really actually, I can see in my playing. There's so many great players who have inspired me in my drumming, but these are the select ones that have some way become a part of my style, my diversity, my teaching, my writing, and helped me develop my unique voice, which is a hard thing to find. You have to really listen inside. So anyway, enjoy the whole Artistic Influence series, and I'll be running them down, and I'll see you at the end. So next on my video series of Artistry Influence that's in my studio, of drummers that have really affected my actual playing is Terry Bozzio. Terry Bozzio goes way back to the Zappa days, of course, and but once again, I did not know him from that. I probably heard it and did not know it was him, and I didn't own any of the Frank Zappa stuff early on. But I would see him in Modern Drummer come up, and I think Terry had the longest run with Frank, and that's where his renown came from, is that whole creation that Frank was doing of going in every direction, and Terry was there with him, going in every direction. And if you see the clips of him, he's an integral part of how all that music functioned. But back then he was playing on a much more regular sort of kit compared to today, of course. And then Terry, like I said, he kept popping up in Modern Drummer magazine. And once again, I'd read about him and I'd go, okay, well, that's interesting. This guy's very unusual. And but it really wasn't until later that he really grabbed me. He really grabbed me when he came out with his DVD series of, it's like melodic drumming, all built around ostinatos. Each one of those things was a ground-cutting event. And I've always said this about Terry. I've always said this, that he could have just stopped playing like 30 years ago, and he would be in drum history forever. He really owns this idea of creating these ostinatos. Now, ostinato is a repetitive phrase. It could be anything. But in the bigger picture of the way that Terry took it is that you could take one limb and have a repeating motif, and then the other three limbs would solo against that. Or two limbs, any two limbs, and then the other two would solo against that, or any three limbs would create this ostinato, this repetitional sort of part that is, it could be a beat long, it could be 2 beats long, it could be 4 beats long, right? And then you have this theme that you are kind of melodically playing against. It creates it's like the clave. It creates this enormous amount of complication mechanically about how the notes mechanically line up against each other. Terry, I got Jeff Beck's guitar shop, and he's on that, and then Blacklight Syndrome. I was building a pet store for my first wife. And while I was building that year was nothing but listening to Blacklight Syndrome. I mean, every time I think about the pet store, I think about Blacklight Syndrome. It just played and played and played and played. And that's he and Levin and Steve Stevens as a trio, just basically playing in any direction that they felt like playing, and allowed Terry to express more of his sort of orchestral sort of backbeat playing. And then he started creating these giant drum sets. There isn't anybody that I can think of that has gone through more like real transformative sort of stages than Terry. You know, he's just recreated himself many times. His original incarnation, of course, was with Frank Zappa in all those years, and then with his sister Dale Bozzio with Missing Persons. They went all electronic pop, trying all sorts of different. You know, they basically were like looking like mannequins in a Beverly Hills storefront in any photo shoot. They just went through every kind of transformation, and that was just is almost too unusual for a lot of people to grab onto back then. But that comes kind of out of the Zappa school of, you know, giving whatever the norms are the finger and just saying, hey, I get to do whatever I want. And it doesn't matter if I, you know, change my kit 50 times, or I change my music styles 50 times, or I change my hair, you know, change my approach. That's the beauty of it in that kind of world. So and then he did the Missing Persons transformation. And then while he was doing that, he was creating this actual whole art form on the drums of the ostinatos, and then came out with that. That's when it hit me. That's when it really grabbed me. I was like, this is really cool to have kind of like your drum set split melodically. And so then I started trekking down that path of going, well, how do I create these, and which ones would I want to create? And you know, what limbs are the most attractive to create the ostinato and then be able to be free? I saw Terry in a clinic in Portland, and you know, sitting, you know, right there in the front watching him, and he got this guy. This is before he had the whole rack, but he was really proud of having all of his stands were black, and his drums were like this wood grain purple to black fade, and so it had a really dark look, and so he leapt out against all of this kind of darkness on the kit. But he would like have these contraptional stands that had like 9 stands all attached to one giant stand, like a regular cymbal stand. He was so proud that they got it all to kind of work, right, to hold up all of this weight. And and I just kept going, why doesn't he just use a rack, right? Why is he just wasn't going to do that for forever. And then all of a sudden, then, you know, he's with DW, he's got the rack, and then he builds this just a monstrosity of a giant kit. And but the kit, when he was explaining it, even with these stands, is all chromatically pitched. So he's got really musical scales going on the whole side, that he had all those drums that are made. They were like all the same size, and they would be pitched differently. And then he walked down after he got done doing that, and he explains, well, actually I have all my cymbals pitched, and he walked down all the pitches of the cymbals that he had picked out so that they walked down in this kind of scale way. And he was speaking very compositionally about how he approaches it and dynamically. And these pieces, you know, he traveled around. He said he had kits and storage in all the continents, so that he could just fly out there and have somebody go out there and get it and drive to the location and start setting it up. You know, it's like days before. And if anybody's seen the time, lapse sort of sped up setup for his kit, you know, even the time lapse takes a while. They're just huge, right? And so you always have people who have the small kit and the large kit problem. I think it's a problem for them, is that they seem to just think everything is like a light switch instead of like a frequency, like a spectrum. And they're so busy trying to tear something down to lift themselves up. So they're either the big kit guys tear down a small kit. That's ridiculous. And why would you only have like 2 crayons to color with? And and then the little kit guys are always going, why would you need all of that? It's all about ego and blah blah blah, such and such, and it doesn't have anything to do with the music. Well, it all does. Like I always say, there are purposes for everything, and if somebody is using all that, which Terry is, then it becomes part of his expression. I always like the guy who always comes up and goes, when they see the poster and goes, man, look at that. Who would ever play all that stuff? And I go, he does. I mean, all it takes is one to validate it. His ideas are legit. So unless you're Terry Bozzio, right? It's kind of like you don't really get to say that ultimately, in the ultimate sense, there's no purpose for it. There is a purpose for it. He's made a purpose for it. So in his life, in his expression, he likes having all these sounds. Of course, that alone will go down in history as this gigantic set that will, in my mind, it's kind of like anybody who just gets big kits just to try to, I don't know, have a big kit. It's kind of like the symbolism over substance argument. And I think this is at the key of what people are really trying to get to about this, is that if you are just trying to collect drum gear and put it in a room and act like you're all that because you have a lot of drums, you've missed the whole point of substance. Substance is actually being able to play. Substance is the substance of character that gets you through the discipline that walks you through to find your artistry. It's not just collecting a bunch of drum hats and shirts and posters and saying you've went to, I went to 1,000 different rock shows and, and that's all you can talk about. Well, yeah, you're the audience then. That doesn't mean that you can play, right? I mean, playing is an actual discipline. So a lot of people supplant the actual discipline, the substance of what will take to get to their artistry, with the symbolism, because the symbolism is a quick fix. It's this ridiculous quick fix. So if Terry was the kind of guy, which there are many, who actually just have big kits because they're trying to get more attention, and they think if they get more attention through their gear, then they'll be a legitimate drummer, at the top of the pyramid. It's just not how it works. It works by grinding out these problems. He's been grinding out problems since before I ever heard of him. He's really worked out some significant things that will stand the test of time. That's why he's Terry. That's why people are going to remember him. 100 years after he's gone, they're still going to be talking about his influence on drumming. Those ostinatos, I went to this whole phase of so I was basically out in this barn, and I built this kind of sort of stage, and over the one kit, I had a header shelf where I could tape all these ideas up, right, and I could just see them right up over the drums. And I went through and I went, okay, so I need to write down all the variations of 16th notes in one beat, and then all the variations of triplets, and all the variations of 3s, 5s, and 7s. And I just had them right in front of me as like it's almost like having the dictionary out there, or all the letters, or your breakdown of all the basic elements. And so you can just see them and then start passing through these different rhythmic elements literally right off the page while you're doing an ostinato. So Terry's thing at the masterclass was that he took all this time. This is so crazy. He took all this time to walk through how he developed this thing, and I think it was Marvin Dahlgren's book, and he starts talking about how he worked through all the 16th note variations. He starts showing them against an ostinato of some type of walking through, here's this variation, here's the next one, here's the next one, here's the next one. And he demonstrates all that. And so that's kind of the core of how he got there, right? He's trying to say this to the clinic. And then he kind of just flippantly kind of says, yeah, and then the rest are they're kind of variations of 3s, 5s, and 7s, but really this is the core. He spends a ton of time doing 3s, 5s, and 7s. Like it is a massive part of his thing. And so there's a couple things in there that I really got from Terry, and as an artist, is that you just follow out this thing. He's in Missing Persons, right? And he was doing like every kind of rototom kit and every kind of transformation of electronics and orchestrative parts to his set. And then at some point, he just kind of went, this is what I'm doing. He made a choice to say, I am going to land on this idea, this kind of a giant melodic kit idea where I can orchestrate these dynamic melodies that I'm creating with these ostinatos. And he's played with him in a symphony, and all these guys, they just get the extra reach to connect their art into other kinds of arrangements, other kinds of settings. And he's done that. He's been very clear in this last iteration of himself that this is where he's landed, really. It's kind of the non-electronic, completely acoustic, orchestrated sort of dynamic drumming, and where half of it isn't even really built around backbeats. It's really built more around dynamic feeling. Those things are huge, right, for me to land. He's played with Jeff Beck and all sorts of shows where he does that, which he's required to play something much more regular. Well, he can, but he's still Terry Bozzio. When they hire these people, they know what they're getting, right? They know, and Terry knows that what he's going to give. There's a certain sort of understanding that, yes, I understand you're an artist. I understand you want to include your art, and we found a way that I can have you on my show, and I can still include my art, and it's not running over my art. It's contributive, and so there's a reason why people hire these people, is because they're good, and there's an attachment there between synergy between artists, and it works. Anyway, the clinic was super, and then I like I said, I totally walked down all these melodic sort of ostinatos. I love tom melodies. I just love them. I've always loved them, and once I put that into my top priorities, once I realized that is a top priority, I just put it at the top and said, this thing, I'm going to follow this thing out, because there's something that is always satisfying when I can have a multi-part groove, both sides of the mirrored kit. I get, 16th, 30-second note variations moving from side to side. I get multi-voices. I get melodies created that are switching. Yeah, I'll explain that in videos that I explain how the linear squared works. And that is like my mind just goes on fire, because I'm like all in. I love being all in. Terry's all in to play that stuff. And so, Terry, I really owe the ostinatos and the bravery to just forge your way regardless. There's a lot of criticism there every time he made changes. And so you've really shown me how to really be much more brave in my art. And I really thank you.